Welcome to Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, Gobekli Tepe.
See, 5% more energy, all that's needed. So yes, please, if you're new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help us. Right, so this week in the chronology, we are still around 9600 BC, going through till about 8000 BC.
Yep.
So what is Gobekli Tepe?
It's an ancient site, containing monolithic blocks found in Turkey.
It's
in
more
the
about
Anatolia
it's
region.
another instance, isn't it, about our ancient ancestors really liked getting really heavy rocks, moving them, and then standing them up.
Yeah.
They were obsessed with this. I think the reason why this caused so much excitement is when a fellow called Klaus Schmidt in 1996 discovered these. Beforehand, we were kind of aware of it from the 1960s, but they didn't realise what it was. Some local farm or something came along, didn't they? But thought it was just stone slabs, basically, because they could only see like the top of the pillars.
Yeah, so perhaps, what was it, headstones, some kind of headstone?
Yeah, some sort of headstones thing. And then it was actually the University of Istanbul and University of Chicago actually did like an expedition in 1963. Thought it was some sort of like Neolithic burial ground.
Yeah.
And then they just sort of filed that report and it just sat in a desk for 30 years.
Yeah.
It was only really because Klaus Schmidt had completed one project and was looking for another one that he even bothered looking. He saw this site and thought, that's worth a poke. And
indeed, was it?
And then when he sort of thought he was expecting a slab maybe that thick and sort of had a big down, and then found this thing.
Stone pillars of substantial size and
6 meters
ornate,
tall, a lot of them.
Carvings.
10 tons in weight, a lot of them. These are massive. But at least they didn't do what the Stonehengians did. Stonehengians. Good word. The Stonehengians, I'm sticking with it, screw it. They decided to get rocks and then transport them 600 miles. These guys only transferred them 100 metres. They had a quarry very close. They moved them 100 metres and built this site on Gobekli Tepe means in Turkish, by the way, Potbelly Hill.
Yeah, so a shallow gradient hill, which is interesting though, because it is still on the high point in the area, so it does overlook all of the surrounding area, which would have been very strategically, militarily, to defend the.
I think maybe from a religious point of view as well, isn't it? If that's what it was built for, some sort of spiritual thing. Again, if you're on a high point looking over the rest of the land, you're that little bit closer to God, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, you do see a lot of that, don't you?
But also, I suppose, if it was built by hunter-gatherers, which is the theory, which we'll talk about in a minute, but if it wasn't, I suppose it'd be easier to find.
But I don't understand how they could even come out with that phrase, though, built by hunter-gatherers. By definition, if you've got stonemasonry that involves engineering and architecture, you're not hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, quite complicated math is involved in this, and skills as well.
Which, in order to develop that complicated math, you're not hunter-gatherers. Yeah. Sorry.
What's that? What was that show, Family Fortunes?
It's just bollocks. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. We'll cut that out. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just you can't go on one hand. Oh, they're really advanced. They're using Pythagoras theorem. They're using pi. They're using all this in their engineering and construction and architecture. But they're just hunter-gatherers.
But
I don't buy it.
This place is like 6,000 or something like that years older than Stonehenge as well. And you could argue that it's a similar sort of site, but actually I think this actually is far more complicated than Stonehenge. Stonehenge, they took the stones, they raised them. Getting the other massive stone on top, and the stones are much bigger at Stonehenge. Don't get me wrong, engineering feat incredible.
Yeah.
Gobekli Tepe, like you said, it's the animal carvings and things though. And these are three-dimensional. They're not just carved into the rock. Some of them are very intricate.
Out carvings, aren't they?
Out carvings,
where the rock the design was there in the first place, and they've been carved out of the quarried material.
Which is just insane. Imagine making a slight mistake. You go, the entire 10-ton block is wrong now.
Yeah.
I was going for a bird and it looks more like a big willy, and I can't. We'd have to do it.
Can't rectify it. Yeah.
No, that's just, it was stuffed on that one. They did all sorts of animals as well. They did lions, bulls, boars, gazelles, insects, snakes, birds. They particularly liked a vulture, which does go in with other theories and things. Other beliefs around this area, that the vulture was considered sort of a spiritual animal. I suppose it's the bringer of death, isn't it? Things like this. It
is in Native
important.
American, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
The vulture was quite a...
It's an important animal.
Animal, isn't it? Yeah, I think.
So that links with that. But, I mean, these carvings are amazing. And for a site that is considered to be the oldest man-made structures sort of thing we've found so far.
So yeah, the chronology is quite interesting, with it being 9,600 BC or 11,600 years ago when it was supposedly built, which coincides with the second spike, the meltwater pulse 1b spike of the Younger Dryas.
Yep. Please go back and have a look at our Younger Dryas episode where we talk about this in far more detail.
Yeah, which was essentially... there were two events, wasn't there? One at 12,800 and one at 11,600 years ago. And they were significant temperature spikes of about 10 degrees centigrade.
Remembering that 2 degrees centigrade terrifies our current scientists.
Yeah, about 10 degrees centigrade in a very short time period, and several hundred feet of sea level rise happened at 12,800 years ago, followed by a period of glaciation for 1,200 years before a second temperature spike and massive sea level rise again. And Gobekli Tepe appears to have been built
right at the equinox of that event, don't
perhaps just after that event. Perhaps they are the survivors of a lost civilization that had to rebuild.
Well, this is one of the
Gobekli
beliefs that
Tepe.
Graham Hancock has, isn't it? These things, Atlantis, or a civilization that we now call Atlantis, was potentially lost in this period, and this was like a reset. And these were maybe the refugees.
Yeah.
Which would explain how they knew how to build this. And they seem to want to build something as well that would last, forever, sort of thing. They wanted to build a marker of some sort. So we're going to get into what we think this site might be at the end. But the two things we're going to take from that is the radiocarbon dating. For one, you can't radiocarbonate rock. We don't know when the rock was cut. What we'd have to do is look for material that we can radiocarbon date.
Yeah.
So in this case, it was a lot of carbon that was found. It was probably from fires, and we can radiocarbon date that because it's got to be alive, isn't it? Basically, it's organic material.
Hydrocarbon, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to carbon date. So all that we actually know is that carbon was there at 9,600 BC. This site could actually be far older, as far as we know. We don't know for certain.
They know that it was buried purposefully, don't they, as well? Rather than buried over time due to the carbon dating of the sediment. Yeah. I think, isn't it? Is it not changing?
It doesn't change, yeah. That's the thing.
From bottom to top, so they know that it was
the radiocarbon dating that is because it also it's bone and all this sort of thing as well. They're pretty confident they know when this was buried. How old the actual site is, though, could be far older. I genuinely think if you've got a site and then it's left alone or whatever for a long time, and then another population comes in and starts setting fires and animals and things like this, you're going to radiocarbon date potentially to that second date, not necessarily the first date when it was constructed. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this with the pyramids. Of course.
Yeah, I believe that's likely to have been done, and perhaps we've got later dates for certain things. Yeah,
and if they cleaned up their fires better, if they cleaned up after themselves better, we'd have no way of dating this site at all, really. All they had to do was sweep up, and we'd have had no way of dating this site. I'm sure it's not as easy as that, but that seems how I see it. So, if you think about what this site was for, so they built these tremines, they call them, these circular structures in the first phase. The first phase of construction was the 9,600 to 8,800, so 1,000 years worth of construction. And they built these circular latrines.
Right.
And they would have a few of these pillars in a circle around it, with then two large pillars in the centre, sort of facing each other. I think they possibly represent man and woman, maybe, or they're supposed to represent humans or people or aliens or something. They're supposed to be some sort of humanoid thing. And for once, archaeology comes in and says this was some sort of spiritual centre of religion or thing, and I actually think that probably makes sense. It's some sort of meeting point to discuss something.
How to rebuild civilization after a great cataclysm.
Maybe, or to
and
pray
draw
to
the
their gods, or
survivors
to
from the local area in.
Yeah, quite probably.
Possibly.
So the thing I find interesting though is they didn't just build one or two large ones of these things. They built 20 small ones. I've got to say, why? Why build so many of them? And I should say as well, only one or two of these things have been excavated. We know there's about 20 of them on the Potbelly Hill because of
Ground penetrating
radar and this sort of thing. So we know they're there, but they've not been excavated. So again, we don't know what could be found. We don't know what else is there.
No.
Then in the second phase of construction, 8,800 to about 8,000 BC, they started doing these square sites. With again, the pillars were still present, but these things, they had no windows, no doors.
Okay.
I don't quite know how they got in and out. But again, in this phase, we're going to talk about another city when we do another episode. And they used to go up and out through the roof. I'm thinking like this Cattle Hayuk. It's another place in Turkey. And it's the strangest site. It's so odd. They built the houses right next to each other. So there's no streets in between the homes. Right? Then they used to go up and through the roof and walk along the roof to sort of get in and move around. So the streets were sort of on the top of the site.
Of the houses, okay, on top, yeah.
Why would you build like that? It's difficult for a start. You're creating complications for yourself by building like that, and the only reason I can think of is it's a defensive measure. So what were they so afraid of that they built their homes like this? And this was around 7,500 BC. Is what they is the official date, but again it could be older. But it's an odd way of building, but they seem to have built a similar way of doing that in Gobekli Tepe. So it seems that around the 8,800 BC, they wanted their religious thing, but they also wanted almost like a sanctuary. They were almost like trying to protect themselves from something. What?
Well, yeah. Well, that brings you on to another place in Turkey, doesn't it? Derinkuyu, the underground cave system that's got 10 levels, or so 10 or more levels, I believe.
Kemakli as well, which is
full ventilation shaft system in operation as well, where it brings air in from the surface to all 10 levels.
And this was constructed geographically in a very similar area. Again, it's in Turkey. It's incredibly complicated to do, incredibly time consuming. And why do these people do this? They were supposed to still be roughly hunter-gatherers, but
we couldn't do a better job today with building an underground city than Derinkuyu, probably. Not much.
Well, I think the Americans are pretty good at building underground cities.
Well, I suppose they're right. Yeah, they've been.
But you have to do it in certain places, though. You have to go for
deep underground military bases, DUMS they call them.
Yeah, that's why I was.
They're all linked by maglev train.
I'm not going with the maglev train thing, but
supposedly they're all linked by underground maglev trains.
Yeah, that's a theory.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a theory.
Oh, there'll probably some of them, but I mean, the Americans, the Americans did when at the end of World War II, the Americans basically said, right, you're not allowed to have colonies anymore. Come on, colonies are wrong, and we went, oh, okay, we'll give up our empire, and then they basically took all those sites. There's 800 military bases around the world. You see a map. I'll throw the map up now. The Americans control the planet.
I know they do. Of course they do.
So, but they're not going to have maglev trains 1,000 miles to these places that they're not. But
no, I meant
we'd notice if they were building it.
I meant more in America. They've built many underground
James
bases,
Bond-esque
underground, many different
underground
cities,
trains,
and they've got underground trains supposedly connecting them all up.
They might do. Well, they were trying to do this 10,000 years ago. Keimakli and Derinkuyu they were constructed, or we believe they possibly constructed around the same time as Gobekli Tepe. So again, what were the people so afraid of? That is the question I keep coming back to. They particularly for these underground cities, the only reason to do that is if you are trying to hide from something.
An impending cataclysm that you're aware of.
Or a cataclysm that has happened that caused the Younger Dryas that you're afraid might happen
and
again.
again. So you, after the first Younger Dryas event, you prepared for the second one almost. Maybe.
Well, we know there were two Younger Dryas events about 100 years apart. So, I mean, they almost learned their lesson, didn't they? Like, geez.
Yeah,
but also, if there was...
1200.
Again, if you watch our Younger Dryas episode, if it was some sort of meteor impact, they would have thought that was possibly the gods or something like that. And there would have been a nuclear winter, potentially. Yeah. So this could have been built like this because they were still afraid.
Quite possibly.
Should say that the Turkish region we're talking about as well at the time would have been woodland and would have been quite lush, because the Ice Age was still only just coming to an end. So that whole temperate region is pushed south. The rain, the winds that go around the planet would have been slightly pushed southerly. So this would have been a lovely place to live at the time. Hence the animals. Things they saw lions and bulls and gazelles and snakes but they saw these animals in there. One thing I'm wondering is, were they carving them because those animals were starting to disappear? They were starting to... The end of the Ice Age was coming. Maybe this site was... Again, because you got to remember, it was built over 1,000 years.
Quite possible.
Maybe this site was almost like a... Come back.
Yeah, they could have carved some animals that were disappearing, or I don't know. I don't know whether the carvings show that they were definitively sort of disappearing species, but it
no,
possible.
That's just me wondering.
It's definitely possible.
They were reverent with these animals were important to them, important enough to, again, like I say, carve three-dimensional statues about them.
Yeah.
Also, in the second phase as well, they started doing a lot of these totem poles that were nearly 2 meters tall. Again, incredibly heavy objects.
Yeah.
That interests me, because then if we're talking about, this was obviously something that was important. Totem poles almost like trying to tell a story. We don't know what that story was. They're horribly worn and whatever. But this seems to be something that ancient civilizations again used to like to do.
Yeah.
Thinking about Native Americans famously, obviously, with their totem poles and their storytelling. It seems to be something that...
Weird that it's then repeated, isn't it, by another civilization?
That's what I was wondering.
Spanning a different continent. Yeah.
The other thing about these sites as well is they probably would have been quite pretty. The floors were sort of like a limestone, but they were polished. So a very advanced... But also, it shows that this site was incredibly important to these people, because that would have been, I imagine, incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about laborious task. They believe these rocks that weighed 10 tons were chipped out of the bedrock using flint knives, basically, flint points. So you just have the rock. Now, it's relatively soft rock compared to like granite or something. It's not like that, but it still would have been incredibly time consuming, and possibly, I don't believe it. So, these stones are incredibly straight, they're incredibly smooth in places, even now today, and it's supposed to have been chipped away by hand with little flint.
Yes, well, many of the sites containing monolithic blocks appear to... or the stones, appear to have been machine tooled, in my opinion. There's no other way you get the perfect finish that you see on so many of these different sites, on so many of these huge blocks that they've carved out of. And yeah, to say, for the example, the Egyptian pyramids and the diorite stones that they used for the internal structure of the pyramids, that again are perfect. Look like they're machine tooled, were chipped out using copper chisels.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about this when we get into series 2 in the pyramids. This is going to be a big topic of this construction methods that we don't believe. and then we'll go around the world with it as well, because there's you always know the name of it, I always forget, the South American site that's got abandoned, and it's got these massive heavy stones.
Oh, Puma Punku, the H block stones up in the
and that's supposed to be done by hand,
it,
yeah, Peru, yeah. Well,
7,000 feet above sea level, and you've got 20-ton blocks, 40-ton blocks that somebody's carried up a mountain.
Seems unlikely, but then some of the machining seems too perfect, even after a couple of thousand years. But
erosion, yeah.
If we go back to Gobekli Tepe, so why they built it is a mystery. How they built it is a bit of a mystery. I do think people are capable of doing amazing things if you've got enough of them. But this is, considering a time we're supposed to be hunter-gatherers, I'd have thought we'd have more important things to do than spend years carving out stones and moving them and standing them up. And
I don't think hunter-gatherers by definition are not performing agriculture. They're hunting and gathering food.
Yeah, and this is another point. There was agriculture on this site.
Until you move on, they're not hunter-gatherers because there was agriculture. If there's agriculture, you're not hunters and gatherers.
No, exactly.
And you need the time freedom from not being hunter-gatherers and being agriculturalists in order to have that free time in order to build things. Otherwise, you don't have the time.
When they've done DNA, sort of looking at the agriculture they found a wheat, and they said it's the strand that you can see through time now that we kind of still use today. So this was the first time we started to actually sort of harvest grain. So yeah, exactly. You could say these are the first lot of people that weren't hunter-gatherers. They don't seem to have lived there. There's been no evidence of dwellings according to mainstream science. And that is when I do yell, no, come on. It's not been found yet, maybe, but there is no way these people constructed this site and had agriculture, which again they found, and not lived there, or not live nearby. And the other thing is as well, this Gobekli Tepe isn't the only site like this in the area. When they've gone looking at other hills in the area, they found similar sites. Again, they've not dug these up yet. They've just using ground penetrating radar. Sites that aren't as big as Gobekli Tepe, but several of these sites in the surrounding areas. This was an important area for people. You're not telling me that they then used to wander off and come back and do anything. No, they must have lived in the area in large numbers as well.
If you just think about how long it takes to travel before the modern era of machine transportation,
everywhere.
They're walking everywhere. So you can't. I mean, they say that about Stonehenge as well, don't they? Where they find, was it lamb bones from Scotland there? So they reckon people
used to travel from Scotland.
I do believe that they could, maybe for a festival like once or twice a year, like the summer or winter solstices or the equinoxes, or maybe all four, and do four.
Definitely, it was a meeting point, wasn't it?
And given the the astrological alignments of these ancient sites with these monolithic blocks, I think that it's quite likely that, given that Stonehenge perfectly showcases the equinoxes and the solstices, then that's when they may have travelled there for a big thing. But you'd have still thought there would have been some people permanently resident in the locality. You wouldn't have thought everybody just flocked into that spot then and nobody lived there for the rest of the time.
I think we can fairly and safely say on that one that mainstream is talking out of its backside. It's another one of these things that it's because that's what we believed. Then we find a site, and certain people with degrees seem to take a very long time to adjust their thinking. That there's just common sense. These cannot have been hunter-gatherers. If you go on Wikipedia or whatever now and look at Gobekli Tepe, it says hunter-gatherers about 9 times. It's just nonsense.
But that's because it fits in with the current ideology of the mainstream viewpoint, which people have been giving out PhDs on from various universities for decades, and they don't really want to have to go back and go, we were wrong.
Yeah. It seems to be very rigid thinking, isn't it? For a long time.
It's basically saying that everything that person's done in their life, who's been a professor in history and been given out Egyptology degrees, for example, they've got to go back and go...
Yeah. I know we need to find the evidence, we need to find the structures where it was lived, but if we live in wooden huts, they might not be there anymore. but I know we need to find those, and we need the evidence. But come on, have a little bit of common sense.
Yeah.
This site would have taken years to build as well. That's the other thing. They weren't just popping in and out
No,
to build this damn thing. Somebody lived there. Anyway, then we get to the really weird thing with Gobekli Tepe, that at 8000 BC it was purposefully buried. Now, Graham Hancock originally believed that it could have been buried due to some sort of cataclysm, but then as the evidence has come in and we've built up things, it is obvious that it was purposely buried. It was purposely buried using mostly sort of flint, but there was like animal bones, and it seems that anything and everything they could get their hands on was used to then bury this site. And we're talking 2 or 3 meters deep.
Yeah,
they buried it. Buried it well enough that, again, even when some of the stones were exposed, they were just believed to be gravestones or heading stones or something. And it was hidden for, 8,000-9,000 years.
Yeah.
So really effectively, people
they
had forgotten
effectively
this place.
buried it.
Yeah. Why? Why go through that effort? That would have been a monumental effort in itself to bury that site. Why not just abandon it?
Well, that's a good thing, and I don't think they really know. I have thought of one interesting theory for that. Maybe it was warring rivals, and the winners buried the losers' city.
Almost like a but again, why not just destroy it?
Maybe
why not knock the pillars over and.
Well, because if you bury it, it looks like it was never even there, doesn't it?
Just wipe it from existence.
You wipe it from existence almost. Maybe it was a statement. That's the only thing I could think of.
I think if it was a war and faction, though, no, it's definitely a possibility. If it was a war and faction, though, and you wanted to think, I think actually like desecrating the site would be more.
Yeah.
Just like this is what we think of your religion, and that's
spiritual. Yeah. Desecration.
That's what we normally do, isn't it? When we go in and you think about bloody Isa, and this is when they were spreading. This is one of the things they did. They blew up all these old ancient churches. They destroyed so much history.
Oh God, I hate to think of the number of artifacts that we've destroyed in the Middle East over the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan.
We try to rub out their beliefs, don't we? I think we said about this in another episode, didn't we? That when an invading people come in, they bring their ideas and their beliefs in, and then we're sort of like you're wrong, we're right, but they have to then try to rub out that thing as well. When we get into talking about Christianity, that's fascinating how they absorbed certain aspects of like Christmas Day. They call it Christmas. Jesus wouldn't have died at this period, but they've picked that day because before that it was a pagan holiday. It was the winter equinox sort of thing, so that's why that date was chosen.
Which just further adds.
It just rubs out the old religion.
Well, it rubs out the old religion, but it also further adds evidence, in my opinion, to organised religion just being a control mechanism orchestrated by the powerful to control the masses.
But that's series 3.
But that's another series, yeah.
We've planned ahead. That's series 3. So I've had a bit of a think about this. One thing I thought about was, would it have been buried if they thought the site was cursed somehow, or something like that? They were almost trying to erase it themselves. I have two thinkings on this, right? Either the people that were living there were having to move away, so they buried it thinking they would return. So the site was important enough to them that they were trying to protect it.
Okay.
So that you bury it with the thinking of the return, but they never did return, obviously. Maybe the desertification was coming in, they had to leave because their numbers couldn't survive there anymore. They bury the site, hoping that the rains will come back, and obviously they never did.
Maybe.
Turkey's still out.
I still think it's a hell of a lot of effort to just bury a site, though. There's got to be some reason.
Another thing is, again, if I said they thought it was cursed. So
maybe. If it was a spiritual place and religion was probably prevalent back then.
They were scared to destroy it, because again they thought it was the gods or whatever, but wanted to erase it or didn't want people. They were almost protecting other people from it if they thought it was cursed somehow.
Yeah, okay, I could buy that if they somehow thought it was cursed. In that film where they find a Egyptian tomb that had been written out of the history books or something like that, and she'd buried herself because that was it. She was a carrier for the plague.
Oh, she was just trying to protect other people
So she was
from
trying
the
to protect
disease.
the people from the disease. So she went and
In the middle of nowhere, and then we
buried
dug her
herself
up.
in the middle of nowhere. And we dug her up, and then we released the plague again. That's the whole premise of.
Well, that could be a similar thing. Maybe there was some sort of plague, but they blamed the site, or they thought it was the site.
That's where I was going to go with it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point. And so then again,
Something they didn't understand that was causing death.
So they thought it was a site, but it was too important. They didn't want to just destroy it, so they buried it, or they couldn't destroy it, or they thought destroying it wouldn't help, so they buried it.
Yeah.
That would actually make sense more for like some sort of disease. I could see that they think that I can understand the logic of burying it, because then you're sort of you're protecting people from the thing, and you're burying the problem, aren't you? And like we do with nuclear waste and things, we bury it. In the hope that it won't cause us problems in the future.
The Ark of the Covenant is an interesting one as well.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's a nice, interesting, mythical
we'll hit
item,
on
isn't
that.
it? The Ark of the Covenant. There's an idea that was supposedly some kind
Destroyer
of
of
nuclear
armies.
reactor.
As well, yeah.
Some kind of nuclear reactor or something like that. Nuclear bomb. So when people opened it, they died.
That's why they were dying.
Nuclear radiation.
Well, it's supposed to be a weapon, wasn't
It's
it?
possible. It's possible. I don't know how much credence there is to that, but
We'll go into it. And we'll watch Indiana Jones again, just to brush up on the history.
It was when we were watching that thing recently with Bob Lazar, the new making of it, and he said, "Well, imagine taking a nuclear reactor from today and dropping it back into Victorian times,
And seeing what
people would do with it. They'd go and investigate it. They'd open it up. They'd die. Somebody else would go in there to try and figure out why the first person died, and they'd die.
And then
the whole mythology would come up, and they'd think it was cursed and that people just died, but they wouldn't know why.
Exactly. Yeah.
So sometimes the unexplainable
is explainable. You're just in the wrong. You don't understand the context or the
your
technology.
understanding, your scientific understanding isn't high enough yet to understand it. So it's still myth.
Most definitely.
But that's what I think we're slowly finding with some of these ancient stories from some of these ancient cultures. As our understanding scientifically is getting better and better, we're going back and going, oh no, that wasn't just a myth. That
makes sense.
That makes sense now because of and
because of the technology.
And I think we're just going to keep doing more and more of that, which is good because it will start bringing more light onto more areas of our.
We are going to talk about ancient technologies coming up, but there's some amazing ones like the the ancient batteries and ancient clocks and
things like this. The Baghdad battery.
Yeah, we've got some fascinating ones coming up, and I think we'll be looking at them possibly in series 2.
Yeah.
So, so Gobekli Tepe.
That's a big sigh there, mate.
I don't know what to make of this site.
I think more investigation's needed, and they've only unearthed about one or 2/50ths of the site, haven't they?
Yeah,
now, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a massive site, and they've dug up one of these things. So it's a few football pitches.
Yeah,
it's a massive site. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of the burial. That's what really. This site would be fascinating on its own because it's the most ancient site we found, and that's another point. It's the most ancient site we've found.
Exactly.
We've only found this in the last few years. What else is out there that we haven't found? And we haven't sort of connected this to Atlantis yet, but I'm going to now. So the date is exactly dead on where we think Atlantis was destroyed, or when Plato says Atlantis was destroyed.
Says Atlantis sunk into the sea, which exactly coincides with meltwater pulse 1b of the Younger Dryas climate period.
This year of 9600 BC, there was a lot going on.
The building of Gobekli Tepe. So
by
a lot
refugees.
seems to be going on around this specific time, doesn't it?
Was it built by refugees of Atlantis? It would explain how they knew how to do it. And the refugees of Atlantis might have built this as a shrine or as a worship area because of what they'd just been through. And again, they may have believed that they were smited by the gods, so they had to
please the gods by building a new religious centre or building for them. Yeah, quite believable. However, the architecture and the engineering design in some of these ancient monolithic sites leads me to believe that perhaps they're not as religious as we think they are. Because we're not very religious now today in the scientifically developed countries. In fact, you find where the populations are very well educated, religion is on a serious decline.
Yeah.
It's only in the countries that are poorly educated where religion still seems to have a stranglehold on people's day-to-day lives.
America's the exception of that rule, but yeah.
If you're, America's a bit of an exception. But so if you're capable of understanding high-level mathematics, Pythagoras, engineering, construction methods, architecture, I don't think you're that religious. Sorry.
Possibly.
I just find that very hard to believe that you're suddenly then...
So then what would you say that Gobekli Tepe was for then, if it wasn't a
I don't know.
spiritual site?
I don't know, but they tend to label all sites as spiritual sites. Everything that's a tomb...
I was going to say as well, we should separate religion and spiritualism there as well, shouldn't we really? Would you call the Native Americans religious, or would you call them spiritual?
That's a good point. That is a good point.
It's maybe different, isn't it?
Spiritual, probably in the sense of the Native Americans, because they don't force anybody to live in a certain way, do they? But it's just about being in tune with nature.
It's almost celebrating nature and trying to connect themselves with nature rather than gods. Even though they call them gods and spirit guides and things like that, it's not a god in the way sort of Christianity is. And this site seems like that to me. It seems more like a sort of a spiritual trying to connect them. In Christianity, we don't have a lot of imagery of animals and things, do we really? But this site does, and they do seem to be trying to connect themselves to nature in very physical ways. This seems like a spiritual site to me,
so I
not
could
a
agree with that.
religious
Yeah,
site.
maybe it's a spiritual site and not a religious site. I'd perhaps go with that. Perhaps not. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I could go with that. I could see how that we may have lost our way in the current sort of right-brained way of thinking, all mathematics and technology, and lost the spiritual side. Maybe this ancient culture still had that spiritual connection, as well as having the right brain, architectural design,
definitely,
construction, etc. So spiritual, but I don't think it's a religious site of the organised religion of that people
it
of
doesn't
that
seem
time.
to be, does it? Well, anyway, it's a fascinating site. It's the most ancient site, and I'm hoping it's not the last time we're going to find a site.
I'm
like
hoping
this.
it's not the most ancient site that we found within the next 10 years. To be honest, hopefully, I hope we'll find something older that smashes it. In fact, we probably already have. I personally believe that the pyramids at Giza are far older than we're told they are.
Pyramids of Giza are so interesting, and the surrounding things that we are going to be doing an entire series on. I think.
Yeah,
can't do it in a couple of episodes. It's too much.
There's
stuff.
too much. What was there? 129 pyramids in Egypt.
I don't know, but we're going to be going on. Yeah,
something to
and
that
the construction,
that effect.
And we have a theory on that as well. Anyway, so if you're new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. And that's Gobekli Tepe covered. It was built by aliens, so we'll just go with that.
It's always aliens.
It was always aliens. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Welcome to brief. Check we're pretty. I keep having to pull my t-shirts down because I'm developing quite large man boobs, and I can see it in the video. I can see my nipples, sort of thing. It's not pretty, so I have to keep making sure my t-shirts.
That's unfortunate.
This is a chunk of it.